It's the Omer before the pause.
That'll be difficult. Okay, so we are up to Samach Vav Amar Aleph, but I want to go back because we have to review. We had a discussion yesterday. When is the right time to start Sefiras Omer? Is it Mimachos HaShabbos, the second day of Yom Tov, and Shabbos means the first day of Yom Tov, or is it Mimachos Shabbos like Sedukim and the Baitusim say, which means the first Sunday of the first Sunday of Pesach? So that is the Shaila, and the Gemara brought two Mishnayos that each bring a series of Tanoim and their rayas that it in fact means the first after Yom Tov. Sorry, I'm just being distracted. So I want to chazir those reasons because the Gemara is going to slug up most of them today. So let's just quickly look at what our Gemara told us so far. So we had the first Mishnah, the Gemara brought, the first raya was the one that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai countered the Tzedokim with. And he said, it says, Sheva Shabbosos, and it says Chamishim Yom. Is it Chamishim Yom or is it Sheva Shabbosos? So he says, if the first day of Pesach is Shabbos, then it's Sheva Shabbosos, because you're counting 7 weeks, meaning starting from Sunday. But if the first day of Pesach is any other day, it would be Chamishim Yom. The Gemara is going to slug up that raya. Then in the same Mishnah, the Gemara brought Rabbi Eliezer, who said, Tisper Loch, a sphere that's Talib Bezdin, meaning based on the day of the month, not a sphere that's based on Shabbos, which you don't need Bezdin for, because anyone can count 7 days. The Gemara is going to slug that up too. Then the Gemara brought from Rabbi Yehoshua that the Torah said, Minei Yomim v'kadosh chodesh, and Minei Yomim v'kadosh atzeres. So just like the chodesh, Samach l'bi asay nikr, af atzeres, Samach l'bi asay nikr. What that means exactly is, by a chodesh, we know that usually you start around the 20th, 29th days, the end of the month, and then the next day will be the new month. So atzeres as well, you know when to count the 50th day, you know to count it from the first day of Pesach, rather than not knowing which day to count from, because we don't know what day of the week it falls out on. And if you count Menachos HaShabbos, it's not even clear what day you start from. You know roughly, yeah. Even though we need the moil, but we know it's like it's 29 days per month. What we know is it's a defined day. It's the 29th to the 30th, not any day of the week, right? So therefore, Huadin, it's mistaber to say that the Omer should also be on a relatively defined day. Then we had Rabbi Shmuel, who said, the Torah says, Habe Omer b'Pesach and Shtei Alechem b'Atzeres, just like one is the day after, is the second day of Yom Tov, so too the other should be, or just like one is at the beginning of Yom Tov, so too the other should be at the beginning of Yom Tov. So Shtei Alechem, we know, is at the beginning of Yom Tov. It's on the first day of Shavuos. It's on the only day of Shavuos. Huadin the Omer should be at the beginning of Yom Tov. And then we had a similar limud from Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, but he used the word Shabbos L'mayla and Shabbos L'mata, but the same thing. The same way by Shavuos, it's on the first day of Yom Tov, so too it should be, the Omer should be close to the first day of Yom Tov. That was the Mishnah. The Gemara is going to say, all of these could be slugged up, except for the last two in this Mishnah of Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Yehuda. Now we have another brayse. Tanu Rabbanan, usvartem lachem, shetei svira l'chol echad ve'echad, mimachas haShabbos, mimachas Yom Tov. Oy eino elo l'machas Shabbos, Bereshis, maybe it means Sunday. So here we had a whole bunch of shittas as well. So instead of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, like we had in the first Mishnah, we have Rabbi Yosy by Yehuda's weighing in. And he says, Tisbur Chamishim Yom, kol svir shat the sofer, lo yu el Chamishim Yom. If you're going to start counting from the end of Pesach, because Shabbos is at the end of Pesach, so really it's going to be 55, 56 days. So that was one raya, which the Gemara is going to slug up. Then the Brisa brings Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, which is the last thing we learned yesterday. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, I don't need Rabbi Yossi ben Yehuda's raya. Rather, I have a different raya, and that is from Tispar Lach, which is a repeat of one of the Tanoim that we had in the first Mishnah, right? Then you had Rabbi Yossi, who had third pshat, Mimachas Yom Tov, Shabbos. So he says, he has a new one. So this is where we're up to now. So this is where we're up to. Rabbi Yossi Omer. Rabbi Yossi wanted to suggest another raya that we haven't learned yet, right? Mimachas Shabbos. It means Mimachas Yom Tov. Mimachas Yom Tov. Oy Einu El Mimachas Shabbos Bereshis. Maybe it means the first Sunday of Yom Tov. Omrit V'chinemar Mimachas Shabbos Shebesoicha Pesach. It says Mimachas Shabbos, but there's 52 Shabbos in a year. Which Shabbos does the Torah mean? If the Torah would have said Mimachas Shabbos Shebesoicha Pesach, then I could agree that Shabbos means Shabbos Bereshis, because the Torah is telling us which Shabbos to start from. But V'haloi Nemar, V'haloi Nemar El Mimachas Shabbos. The Chalashana Kulam Alei Shabbosos. Say Budoik is Shabbos. How are you going to know which one it is? If it means, if Menachos Shabbos means referring to the first day Yom Tov, it's clearly defined when the Torah wants to start counting from. But if Menachos Shabbos, Menachos Shabbos Bereshis, Mehechadesi means the Shabbos of Pesach. It could be any Shabbos of the year. I'm sorry? And the Kanami, but Mehechadesi that this Menachos Shabbos. I don't know, it's a Sunday, if it means Sunday. V'oid, another raya that Rabbi Yossi wants to bring, Nemer Shabbos Lamata v'Shabbos Nemer Shabbos Lamayla, which we also had in the first brisa, right? Mal Alon Regel Utchilas Regel, Avkan Regel Utchilas Regel. The Gemara is going to point out, if Rabbi Yossi loved his first shot so much, why did he need a va'id for? Elamai, you see, Rabbi Yossi himself realized that his first shot wasn't so good. And Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Kosav Echad Omer Sheshes Yomim Toichel Matzos, the Kosav Echad Omer Shivish Yom Matzos Toichelu. Do you eat matzos for 7 days or for 6 days? The teretz is Haketad Matzosi Ata Yechol Loich Lo Shiva Min HaChadosh Ata Yechol Loich Lo Shisha Min HaChadosh. You eat matzah 7 days, but only 6 of those days are from the Chodosh, because on the first day of Pesach you weren't allowed to eat matzah from the Chodosh. So once again, you see clearly that on the second day of Pesach is when we bring the Karban Omer and when we start the Sefirah. Then it says in the pasuk. Now we're going a little bit off. Miyoim havi ochem tispru. When do you start counting from? From the day that you bring the Omer. Yochel yikser v'yovi. You might think that you should make the tzira and you should bring the carbon ve'imasa sheyirtza yispar, but the count can start from any day. Talmud loymar mehachel chermesh bakoma tochel lispar. You have to start counting when you cut the chadash wheat. Ime hakel chermesh tochel lispar yochel yiksar v'yispar. Maybe what has to be at the ktsira and the svira, but ve'imasa sheyirtza yovi. Maybe the carbon doesn't have to be brought that day. Maybe it could be brought a different day. Talmud loymer, you're also counting miyom aviyachem. So the sphere has to be sai mehachel chemesh bekama and miyom aviyachem. Zok the Gemara or zok the Brisa, miyom aviyachem yochel yiksar v'yispar v'yovi b'yoim. Maybe all of this should occur by day, and you don't do the ksir the night before because everything is miyom aviyachem. Talmud loymer sheva shabbosos temimois tihiena. When does the day start? At night. So if you're only going to start counting by day, that's bizman otherwise you won't have the complete 7 weeks, because you're going to lose the first night if you only start counting from the next morning. So maybe you should bring the carbon at night too. The carbon must be brought by day. Haketzat ktsira usafira balayla. The ktsira is omer, and the beginning of the counting starts at night. But the carbon is bayoim. Zokt Rava, Omer Rava, kulu islu pircha. All of the different svaras that we had to bring a raya that Mimachas Shabbos means the second day Yom Tov, islu pircha could be slugged up. Bar mitarti tanoi basroi bein b'masnisa kamaisa bein b'masnisa brisa. The last two Tanoim in each of the 2 braysos that we quoted, those are the only pshatim that cannot be slugged up, the less lupircha. And let's start with the first brisa. The first raya in the first brisa was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Imi di Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. What did Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said? He said it says Sheva Shavuos and it says Sheva Shabbosos and it says Chamishim Yom. So the Gemara asked, how is that possible? So the Gemara, Chamishim Yom is if the day, if the day of Sevira, the beginning of Sevira, is not on a Sunday. If the beginning of Sevira is on a Sunday, then the Sheva Shabbosos, you're counting 7 weeks starting from Sunday. But if Lamashal, it's a different time. If it's a different time, then it's just 50 days, right? That's how the Gemara learns from Rabbi Zakkai Raya. But for Gemara Dilma Kabaye, maybe that's not what you learn from the Shavuos and the Yomim. Maybe you learn like Abaye, Damar Abaye, Mitzvah Lemimna Yoime, or Mitzvah Lemimishvuei. Like our halacha, right? We count days and we count weeks. So I want to pause here for a moment, and we're going to be mamshich shortly. Zogt the Heilige Gemara weiter. Zogt the Heilige Gemara weiter. So we've showed how you could technically slug up Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's pshat. So now we'll go to the next pshat. Let's go to Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shua's pshat. Their pshat was that. What was their pshat? Rashi says, he reminds us that it's tluy bebezin, right? It says tisbar lecha, it's tluy bebezin. Yeah, you could do it by yourself. And Rabbi Shua said, samach lebi and nikeres, that you count from generally the same day. Those two svaros you could slug up. Why? Mimai de b'yom tov rishon kai. Who said b'chlal that you start counting from the first day of Yom Tov? Maybe b'machas Shabbos means from the last day of Yom Tov. Dilma b'yom tov achrin kai. So in Mela, you can bring a klaraya. You might have a right that it's not Shabbos, but mehekataisi, if it's only because you're saying it has to be either on a noticeable day, or that it should be tluy b'bezdin. So mehekataisi, you start svira on the second day of Pesach. Maybe on Yisrochak Pesach you start. So that's not a good svara either. The Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseir, less lupircha, because their raya was both just like by Shavuos, it's on a defined day, but at the beginning of Yom Tov. So too by Pesach, it's at the beginning of Yom Tov. Those rayas you can't argue with. That's in the first brisa. Now in the second brisa, who was the first raya? It was Rabbi Yosy ben Yehuda. Even Rabbi Yosy ben Yehuda, what was his taina? His taina was, it says b'yoyim hachamishim, but if you were going to start counting at the end of Pesach because you're waiting for Shabbos, it could be 55, 56. That I could slug up. Havamino dilma chamshin levar mahanishita. Who said when the Torah says 50 means 50 from the beginning of Yom Tov? Maybe it means 50 from when you're going to count, from when you're going to start counting, right? Even Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseir's raya was right at the top over here. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseir said, Tisbalach Svir Tli Bebezdin, right? That's the same as far as before. Either Jew ben Seir, Mimaid B'Yom Tov Rishon Kai, Dilma B'Yom Tov Achron Kai. No, let me just let's look up Rabbi Yehuda ben Seir again. Rabbi Yehuda ben Seir Omer and Yitzarech Harehu Omer Tisbalach Svir Tli Bebezdin Yota Shabbos Bereishish Sfirosa B'Chaladam. So again, who said that it's referring to the first day of Yom Tov? Maybe it's referring to the last day of Yom Tov. Okay. And Rabbi Yosy Nami, Chazi le Pircha. He also held that Pircha. That's why he said V'oid, because Rabbi Yosy Machas Shabbos Machas Yom Tov. So how does he know? How do you know which one? So that's how I know it must be Machas Shabbos of Yom Tov. But which Yom Tov is Yom Tov Rishon, Yom Tov Sheni? That you don't know. Sorry, not Yom Tov Rishon, the first day or the last day, right? Again, you don't have a raya. So and Rabbi Yosy Nami Chazi le Pircha to come V'oid. That's why he's stuck in V'oid, and his V'oid does answer it. Shabbos L'Mata, Shabbos L'Mayla, Malal Regel, Tchilas Regel, Regel, Tchilas Regel. That was Taka Good Raya, because that means it has to be the first days. Beautiful. Gufa. Omer Abaye. We had a halach from Abaye shortly ago, which we used to slug up Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, right? Mitzvah lemimni yomi, mitzvah lemimni shvuyi. Rabbanon devei Rabashi takamanu yomi and takamanu shvuyi. But a Meimar didn't. A Meimar was manu yomi v'lo manu shvuyi. Why? The pasuk said you're supposed to. The teretz is Omar zeicha l'mikdashu. He holds nowadays Sviras Omer is not a deraisa. Sviras Omer only today is l'zeicher l'mikdash when they had a carbon Omer. Now it's only a zeicher. Al zeicher it's enough to count days. You don't have to count weeks. Katzru, now we're going into the nitty-gritty of how they process the Omer. And the Gemara, the Mishnah is going to tell us today what Rav Baruch already told us yesterday. Remember yesterday I said, if it's caramel, how can you grind caramel? It's soft. So you said they dry it out. Right? That's what you said. That's what the Mishnah says. Katzru, they cut the Omer, v'nasnu b'kupois, and heavy ula zara, v'ayim ha'avav v'noisa be'or. They actually singe them in fire to dry them out. Because it does say koli. And it says, Divrei Rab Meir, these are the words of Rab Meir. Before they would put them in fire, they would beat them. But why did they use kanim and koiches, which are not hard things? They're soft things. Kidei shelo yismayach, so it shouldn't crush them. Now, why do they beat them? So Rashi says later on. I think it's to get rid of the skins that we don't want to be ground together with the kernels. But they didn't want to hit it with too hard because they didn't want to crush it. Because I guess they wanted to do koli before it got crushed. Okay, nosnu la'ovav, they put it into an ovav, which was a clean choishes. Rashi says, v'zeh shemai. And what was an ovav? The ovav hayamanukav kadei sheyei ha'ar shoyleit b'chulu. So how did they roast it? They roasted it on some type of keli that had holes in it. Okay. Shatchu ba'azara, and then after they roasted them, they spread them out in the azara. V'aruach min hashevas boy, and the wind would dry it out. And then nosnu l'rechaim shal groisos. They put it into rechaim, not a rechaim that was made fine flour, but a rechaim of groisos. Rashi says shlohayu teichnu is dak ela'ova shekain derech hasoilas. I guess that's how they make soilas. I'm not sure exactly what this means. Ugrusois. What does it mean, grusois? Hainu loshon grisen should teichnen behen pullen. There was some type of bean they used to grind. Ve'ein maitzia ela haklipa benafa me'agarinon. What they did is they didn't grind the actual bean, but what they did is they separated it from the shell. Now we have over here a yutches. I just want to look at the yutches in the tziyonim. Be'atzmoi. Me'agrim be'atzmoi. Shem yitchenu yofe, if it would have been ground very stark, yavor, and let me look back at the Yutes, yavor subin shalaklipa. Then, like the bran would get into the mix, and that they didn't want. Benapa imasoilos l'shem kach niger gerish karmel. So they ground it not into fine pieces, but it was enough to separate flour that could be sifted out, right? Now, they had to sift it in order to get the finest of flour from this rough type of grinding. The net of all of these three soyin was only one yisorin. It had to be sifted 13 times. Zokt Rashi, Mefarish Beil Menachos, which we're going to learn eventually. Bidaka, begasa bidaka. First they put it into a fine filter, then a thick filter. I don't know the filtration methods, but the Gemara in Daf Ayin Vav will go through the exact method of the sifting. Vashar. Now, if you're only getting an isarin out of 3 saw, what do you do with all the leftover product? It's still a good usable product. Nifta, but the Gizbar sells it, and anybody can buy it. V'noichal or v'nechal l'chol adam, anybody could eat it. V'chay v'chala, because what is someone going to do with that stuff that he buys? He might grind it further. He'll make it into flour and make a dough. Reishos are risoy seichem. When is the chiv chala chal? When it becomes a dough. When it became a dough, did the produce belong to a yachid or did it belong to hektish? Belong to a yachid. So the chiv chala was chal. Upatim and a meiser. Why? Because the chiv meiser comes by miruach. The miruach had occurred when it was in the possession of hektish, and therefore there is no chiv of meiser on it. But Rabbi Kiva was mechayiv sai bechala and sai b'meisreis, and we're going to have to get an explanation for Rabbi Kiva. Zok Tele Gemara, Taner Rabbanim. Let's look at the pasuk that we are darshaning. The im takriv minchas bikurim lashem. So this pasuk is not. This Mishnah was not talking about the Omer, which was made out of sa'irin. It was talking about the shtei lechem, because that's what this pasuk is. V'im takriv minchas bikurim lashem. This was the mincha. This was the shtei lechem moschiten, right? So it describes the pasuk describes it in detail. It says oviv. It has to be oviv. It has to be koli ba'esh. It has to be geresh carmel. Geresh carmel. So we have to see what these things mean. So turn around oviv when the Torah says oviv, ze oviv. It means it's oviv, which Rashi says reish is ktsir. It's got to be the first of the cutting. Koli ba'esh. It says also kol ba'esh. Malamid show Yisrael mahavav in oisay ba'esh kidei l'kayim by mitzvahs koli divrei Meir. They actually roasted it in actual fire to be mekayim the mitzvahs koli ba'esh. But v'chachamim they didn't actually roast it directly in fire. Ein or loshen koli, directly in the fire is not loshen koli. Ella davar acher. So the gears here is not so geschmack. Ein or loshen koli ella davar acher. Imu mahavenoy mamish baor and yunikra keli. And a koli, rather they had to put it into some type of container. They had to put it into some type of container. Okay? And then there's another lashon here. Ein lashon koli ella davar kolil, which is another lashon. Is it has to be in a klei nechoshes. Okay, so ein davar ella davar acher nekoli klem aidei davar acher. So you couldn't directly put it into a flame, which is how the Tanakama learns. Rather, you have to heat it up in a keli. Ketzad aviv shal kloyos hayasham. There was the Ovo Shoklois means, I assume it means the keli, that the people, it was a copper pipe, it was a copper pipe used by people who would prepare klois. It had holes in it. Why? So that if you put it in the fire, the kernels inside it would get heated and dried out. So that's how they did it. They didn't directly put it on a rack and put it into the fire. Rather, they put it into a keli, and the keli they heated it up, and that's what got it dried out. It says aviv kolui geres. Now the problem is it says aviv, it says geres. The question is, when did they roast it? Did they roast it while it was a kernel, or did they roast it after it was already geres, after it was already made into a flour? Any day im aviv kolui. Im geres koli. When did they do the roasting? So if you look at the pasuk, it says aviv koli ba'esh geres karmel. So the ba'esh separates between the aviv and the karmel. It's before the geres. Therefore, aviv koli ba'esh, it's going to be roasted when it's still a kernel. Then geres, then they ground it. Carmel. This we had right away at the beginning of the parak. Rach umol, it has to be soft, and you could squish it in your hands. The Chain Hu Omer, in Sheshtetin Pasuk, where do you find that Carmel is a lashon of two? Carmel is one word, but it's really a combination of two words together, right? Rach umol, the Chain Hu Omer, it says V'ish ba mibal shlishia, mibal shalisha. The Yaveh Elisha Lakim, he brought the Navi. Lechem bikurim, the esrim lechem. So this is someone who brought this to Elisha. Esrim lechem, so'orim, v'karmel bitzik loinoi. He brought Carmel bitzik loinoi, and the v'cheinu oimer here is we're showing you. We're not bringing a wire from the word Carmel over here. We're bringing a wire from the word tzik loinoi that a word sometimes is an utrikon of multiple words together. V'yoimar tein la'adam v'yolchu. So B'tziklanu is ba, he come, v'yotzaklanu, and pour for us, v'achalnu, and we'll eat it, v'navahaya, and it'll be geshmak. So that's how we darshan the word B'tziklanu. Rashi breaks it down for us. Beis is ba, tzadik is v'yotzak, lamed is lanu, vav is v'yachalnu, nun vav is v'nava, hayana, hayalachem. It ended up making a nice bread for them. V'omer, we have another pasuk that says this also ba'hovim. This is talking about two people who are frolicking together. Be'isr, there's a ma'aser nus happening over here. It says this also ba'hovim. The lovers are nisalis. Nisa v'niton. They're going to handle with each other. V'nala, and we're going to go up. V'nismach, and we'll be happy. V'nischate ba'hovim. So Rashi teaches when nischate means netayel k'may ben mischatei lefe'avav. But I'm sorry, Rashi nisalsa b'mina efes ksiv. It's referring to an efes. It says nisalsa ba'ahavim. So what does it mean nisalsa? What does it mean? What are they saying to each other? Shaimeris lemanai. If the woman tells the man nisalsa ba'ahavim. What does nisalsa means? Nasa. V'noten, let's have fun together. V'nala, we'll go into the bed. V'nala lamita, we'll climb into bed. V'nismach, and we'll party. V'nischate and we'll do the Avera of lovers. So you see the word nis also is a combination of many words. Omer, another pasuk where you find something similar to that. It says in the pasuk, knaf renonim ne'alosa im evra chasida v'noitza. This is talking about where a bird's going to lay its eggs. So it says knaf renonim, which is a bar yuchni. It's a type of bird. Nis alsa. What does this also mean? Rashi says it's a trikin. Noisei beitzasoi. It carries its egg. Oila lemaila. It goes up. V'nischate, and it lays the egg. It takes it excretes it from its body. Umaridoi bekinoi, in its nest. She'eda matal beitzasoi ad sheyala bekan hamayuchad loy. The bird will not lay its egg until it is in the place where it's supposed to be laid. So the nun of Nisalsa stands for noise. Then there's the aleph lamed. Al means oila. Ches is chitoi. I guess the hay is like a ches. I'm sorry? Yeah. Chitoi. V'hai chitu loshen hayrod. It's a loshen of excreting. Because it's not b'mezech juma. Hischel mechate v'yoyred. Okay, so that's another example of such a nutrican. Omer, it says by the Malach told Bilam, V'yomer Malach Hashem al ma kisas hasoincha zeh shalosh regalim. Hine anochi yatzasi l'satein ki yorat haderech l'negdi. What does yorat mean? Ki yorat haderech l'negdi. Your asa, your animal saw. Ra'asa, it was afraid, I guess, and not saw, and it turned away. So that's what the lashon of yorat means. Let me just look at the art scroll to make sure that I'm touching the Ra'asa right. Your Ra'asa was afraid, your Ra'asa saw, not so feared. Oh, so it says it before it's out. Okay. The Rabbi Shmuel Tana, he learns Carmel doesn't mean Rachumol, he holds it's Carmole. It's like a full pillow. Meaning, Zokt Rashi, has Hi Karlosh and Kar Muksasa Shaya Zug Shal Klia Mole Begarin Shaya Garin Mavushal Kal Tarchai. Oh, so Carmel means it has to be totally does Mavushal mean totally ripened, or does it mean totally roasted? It should be totally ripe. That should it be. It should be totally ripe, and it'll look like a stuffed pillow. Okay. Now we're going to go on to the machloikis as to whether or not. I'm sorry.
The first, the letter.
Right. That's right. Now we're going to discuss the machloikis as to whether or not you take maisrus, even though the miruach was done in the possession of hektish. For Rabbi Kiva Machayev Bechala Uva Maisrus. Zogt Rashi. No, I don't. I'm not up to there yet. So Zogt Gemara. Omer Rav Kana. Omer Hoyer Rabbi Kiva that miruach hektish einoi poiter. Kahana learns shot in Rabbi Kiva that miruach hektish doesn't pater. Zogt Rashi miruach u'gemar malach l'maiser. Einoi poiter that filochi chai b'maiser. Fragt the Gemara, how could you say that? Moser Reb Sheshes. Moiser shaloi soin halolu mahu yoisim bay. So this is a brisa that's discussing the same subject as our Mishnah. Nivta v'necha l'chal adam v'chayiv b'chala upotim v'maisris. That's the Tanakama. Rabbi Kiva mechayiv b'chalu v'maisris. Now the brisa always elaborates on the discussion between the Tanoim. So the brisa now shares with us the response that the Chachamim told Rabbi Kiva. Omullah, they told him, Poidim yad gizbar yechiach. You agree with us that if you would go buy wheat from a gizbar, that you wouldn't have to take off maisris. So why over here do you say you have to take off maisris? Poidim yad gizbar yechiach shechai b'chala upatim in the maisris. So Zogt Reb Sheshes, Rav Kahana, if it's true that Rabbi Kiva doesn't hold like that, if that's what Rabbi Kiva holds, my kamerle, what exactly were they even asking him? He. That's exactly the same thing. So Rashi, poidim miyad gizbar, sh'ar chitin and etzmochem miyad gizbar, yechiach. Not the shtelechem. Anytime someone would buy wheat from the gizbar, everybody agrees there. Shapotim and a meiser. If that's what the Chachamim told Rabbi Kiva, it must be mechalal dehumoida the miruach hektish b'alma poiter. So how could you, Rav Kana, say pshat on Rabbi Kiva is that he holds miruach doesn't pater? Otherwise, what's the Chacham telling him? The ain't put in my karmelay. Sagt Gemara, he, Kloimer, ki hechem the hacha pligi, hakanami pligi b'piyot b'yad gizbar. Sagt Rav Kahana, no, he. Maybe Rav Kiva argues even there. The Chachamim were telling him, what do you mean, piyot b'yad gizbar would be potter for meiser? And he's saying, no, I disagree with you. I held it would be chayv meiser. V'oid, eisvei Rav Kahana, but achlifei Rav Kahana. Another kasha that was asked. No, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. He is the Gemara's kasha, still on Rav Kahana. My karmeli, he, it's the same thing. Obviously, Rabbi Kiva must hold that miruach in the hands of Hektish does pater from Meiser. So that's kasha number one in Rav Kahana. It must be the Rabbi Kiva hold that miruach b'yad Hektish does pater. But we have another kasha on Rav Kahana. Eisei Rav Kahana bar tachlifa the Rav Kahana. Rabbi Kiva, the Bride says, Rabbi Kiva mechayiv b'chala u'v'maisris. You know why? Lefi shaloi nitnu mois ela l'tzarech lahen. Rabbi Kiva says his reason, and it's not because of what you said that miruach b'yad hektish does not pater from meiser. It's because whenever the money was paid by hektish to buy these kernels, they weren't really buying all of the kernels from whoever they bought it from. They were only buying the little bit that ends up being used, the Yisrael. All the rest, Hektish never even bought. They had to extract it and separate it from the rest. But there was only the only part that was mum and Hektish was the actual part that's going to be brought. So Mamela, the miruach was never biyad Hektish because the miruach of the rest of the kernels there were all belonging to Chulin. Zokt Rashi, Rabbi Kiva Mechai Bekemach HaNoisar, My Isar and Shal Omer Kamairi, Levi Shalei Nitnu Mois Hektish El B'Tzarech Lahem. Lisar, Avalo Achar, all the rest, Loi Kiddush, never became Kodesh. Hilchach Lav Miruach Hektishu, the Lav Kodesh. But what do you see from here? Alma Miruach Hektish Poiter, V'Hacha Mishum Dlenitnu Moisu. So Rav Kahana, your pshat is wrong. You said Rabbi Kiva holds that Miruach Hektish doesn't pater. In fact, you have a chlor riot. Rabbi Kiva holds Miruach Hektish does pater, except this was not Miruach Hektish. Alom Rabbi Yochanan, Talmud Archu B'Piv Shal Rabbi Kiva. It's a klora halacha that Rabbi Kiva would say all the time. Shalanitnu mois ella letzarech lahen. The only money that was given is money that's to pay for only what was needed. The rest never became mois hektish. Omer Rabbi Pshitali the miruach hektish poter. It's partial that it paters. As Rashi says, koina makdish oimrim gedoshim umorchen gizbar. It's partial that peturmin amaisal oilam. The only reason why Rabbi Kiva was Machayev was someone who bought the leftovers of the Shtei Lechem is Ella Shalei Nitnu Mois Ella L'Torech Lehen. Of a Miruach Hektish Ba'alma Poiter. Miruach Ovid Kachavim, that's going to be a Machloikes Tanoim. Zok Rashi, what's a Miruach Ovid Kachavim? Going to Lekeach Min Ovid Kachavim. So if the Miruach was done in the hands of the Goy and then you bought it from him, the Kosovar ain't Kinyan La Ovid Kachavim Be'er Yisrael Lav Gimedei Meiser. So that's where there would be a machlokes. Tanoi, the Tanya, Tarmin Mishal Yisrael al Shal Yisrael, Umishal Oivdik Kachavim al Shal Oivdik Kachavim, Umishal Kusim al Shal Kusim, Umishal Kol al Shal Kol. Diver Reb Meir. Reb Meir holds even from a goy you can use to be mesak and tvu of a yid. Clearly, he holds that a goy's miruach is still going to be mechayiv you and meiser. So that's the one shita. But the beauty of Rabbi Yosy, Rabbi Shimon Oimrim, Tarmin Mishal Yisrael al Shal Yisrael. Mishal Oivdik Kachavim al Shal Kutim, Mishal Kutim al Shal Oivdik Kachavim, Avoloi Mishal Yisrael al Shal Oivdik Kachavim, because that's Menachiv al Aptur, V'loi Shal Kutim V'shal Mishal Oivdik Kachavim, V'loi al Shal Oivdik Kachavim Mishal Kutim, because that's Menachiv al Aptur, V'loi Mishal Oivdik Kachavim Mishal Kutim al Shal Yisrael, because that's Menaptur al Hachiv. So here it illustrates the Machloikes Tanoim in this sugya. Gilgul Hektish Poiter. Now we're talking about if the challah was made when it's Hektish, it's Poiter min challah im nesgalgul isa via Hektish v'yakach niftis that na nekdisha isasa at shaloi gilgula. If the isa became Hektish before it was nisgalgula, I'm not sure what that means. If it's needed, I'm not sure exactly at what point Gilgul is. Uvedasa. Chayeves, it'll be chayev, but mishagilgul of dasa. But once it was Mishagilgala uftasa chayeves. No, Makdishi says actually gilgala uftasa chayeves mishagilgala. I don't even know what you're saying. Uftasa chayeves biyad hedjit nisgalgala. Okay, I'm sorry. Actually gilgala uftasa, then you repeat it chayeves, you'll be chayev. Mishagilgala uftasa chayeves. What does this mean? Then it shouldn't be chayev, it should be potter.
What?
No, I'm not sure. Akdisha says actually gilgala uftasa chayeves. So someone how to read this. Similarly, if she was makdashit and then she mixed it, misha gilgala uftasa. If she made gilgal and then she was poidig it, chayeves. Why would it be chayev? So how does he say over here? If she consecrated the dough after she mixed it and later she redeemed it, chayeves. Why? I'm not sure why. Why would it be chayev there? It's hektish. So we're gonna. Well, I guess we'll pick up on this tomorrow, because he says mishagil dosa means it was belonged to her when she was Megalgalit. Then she was makdashit after the Gilgal, and then she was paid it. So it would still be chayiv because b'shas the Gilgal it wasn't hektish yet. That's right. But akdisha achaloi Gilgala, the Gilgal agizbar the achar pedasa, then it's patura shebetas shebishas chayvasa hoisa patura. So all that we don't care before and after. B'shas the Gilgal itself, if it was hektish at that time, it's potter from challah, and if it wasn't hektish at that time, it's not potter from challah. Okay, so we'll stop here. Tomorrow we're not learning, but we're going to learn Thursday morning at 7 and at 9.